Hi, thank you for joining us. This is a special online program hosted by the Mirowitz Center, and my name is Laura Bryant. Our guide today is Elana Kaplan, a former St. Louisan and an independent museum educator and lecturer. She was an educator at the Metropolitan Museum of Art for 25 years and currently leads private tours at the Met and other museums, as well as virtual tours for groups around the globe. Today, Elana covers part 2 of our 3-part winter series. In December, she shared the beauty and history of American stained glass windows. This month, Elana's helping us shake off the winter chill, and everybody knows what I mean by that, with cozy American interiors. We never had a program that was as timely as this one. Then in February, next month, Elana will help us honor Black History Month with a program about modern storytellers whose lives intersected with the Harlem community. So welcome, Elana, and thank you for being part of the Mirowitz Center community.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Laura. It's great to be back. And when we picked this topic, I think in the summer, we didn't realize really how timely it would be to have cozy interiors on such a cold, snowy week. Um, so I'm very much looking forward to this program. And I know, some people might have thought furniture, cozy interiors, what's that going to be about? But I think that you'll see that there's a lot that goes into these rooms that we're going to look at. And anyone who is interested in history or architecture, furniture, textiles, I think will really appreciate this program from lots of different angles. Okay, so we're going to get started with the screen share. Okay, here we go. So we're at the American Wing. The American Wing is actually celebrating its 100th anniversary, or is celebrating its 100th anniversary last year, but we're still celebrating it. And the Met itself was established in 1870. Um, and since it was establishment in 1870, it acquired important examples of American art, even from the beginning. But then in 1924, they opened a new American Wing to display the domestic arts of the 17th to early 19th century. And then in 1980, they opened this new Engelhard Courtyard, which included painting and sculpture galleries and the skylit courtyard. So for anyone who was on my program last time, we talked about stained glass windows. And don't worry, all the programs are independent. They don't build on each other. But for those of you who were on the last program, you remember we talked about stained glass windows that are mostly located in this Engelhard Court, which is the first area that you walk into. It's the entrance into the American Wing. And in this very brightly lit Engelhard Courtyard, all of the art that you see in here is either made by an American artist, an American theme, or made in America. So the area we're going to be looking at period rooms or historical interiors today, and most of them are actually beyond this door that you see right here. This facade that we're looking at is a bank facade from Wall Street that we'll also talk about later in our program. And most of the period rooms are kind of beyond this door and back into the American Ring. Now, the American Wing, besides stained glass windows that we looked at last time and the furniture and periods that we're looking at this time, the American Wing has more than 20,000 works of art, which include they're from the time period from colonial to early modern periods, and it includes paintings and sculptures, works on paper, decorative art, including furniture that we're going to look at today. It also has textiles, ceramics, glass, silver, metalwork, jewelry, basketry, quill, and bead embroidery. So you can see that the American Wing and its 20,000 works of art is quite an expansive collection. But it actually started in the early days as a collection of historical interiors and architectural fragments. And that's really what we're going to be focusing on today. So just a little bit about background of the period rooms, and then we're going to watch a small video. So the Department of American Art was officially founded in 1924, and it was a department of historical decorative arts, primarily furniture. And when you came to the Met in 1924, you would have seen these innovative settings of period rooms or historical interiors. And a lot of the, I think almost all the rooms we're going to see today were in the museum in 1924. Today, there are 20 period rooms in the American Wing. So we have 20 rooms that show historical interiors, and they span in time from 1680. That's our earliest room. It's called the Hart Room, and we will be looking at that today. That's our earliest room, and the most recent room that we're going to look at is from 1915, and it's a Frank Lloyd Wright room. The rooms show, I think what's so interesting about them is they're not just furniture, but they actually show the lives and interiors of many different people who lived in America, from farmers to well-to-do New Yorkers, from the founding fathers to immigrants. And you can really experience the history of interior decorating and interior design in America in these rooms. And you can experience it through over the course of 3 centuries. And people really say that there would be no American Wing at the Met without the period rooms. So these are really important rooms that we're going to look at today. And just a little bit of historical background to it. If you think about the time period when the American Wing was founded in 1924, and the conception of the American Wing in 1924 was really to show these rooms. And historically, it was a time when there was a lot of immigration to America in the 1920s. So the American Wing was kind of set up to show these new immigrants what it meant to be American. So again, there's a lot of history in these rooms and in the furniture that we're going to look at. So before we get into the details of the room, I want to show you a video. I think it's like a 25-minute video. We're just going to watch the first 3 minutes, and it's about celebrating the centennial of the American Wing. But as you're looking at it, you'll hear the curator and the director talking about the importance of these historical rooms. They're called historical interiors. They're called period rooms. I call them period rooms. But you'll hear them talking, and then you'll see some of the rooms in the video that we're going to look at in detail later on. But I think it's important to see the rooms in context of the American Wing, and also to get to hear a little bit about the overview from the director and from the curator. So we'll start with about 3 minutes of this video, and then we'll go into the rooms and look at them in detail.
The American Wing at the Met is at the very center of the understanding of this museum, of the understanding of the genesis of this great institution, and also for the understanding of how American art and how American culture came into being. And it allows you to appreciate American art at its best and American history at its most complex.
The American Wing is the Met's historical collection of American art, that is American decorative arts and fine arts, painting, sculpture, works on paper, broadly from the mid-17th century to the mid-20th century. It was founded in 1924 as a department of historical decorative arts, primarily furniture. And when you came in 1924, what you would have seen were these rather innovative settings of so-called period rooms or historical interiors. We're marking the 100th anniversary of the Wing, and in that time, really focusing more on the collection and how the collection has evolved. We've been just seeing how far we've come in 100 years.
And what I find so fascinating, as someone who, of course, comes from Europe, it is a way to get to know American art and culture. For an international audience to really experience American art in all its development, in all its complexity, in all its diversity.
The American Wing was founded during a really extraordinary colonial revival zeitgeist that was crossing the nation. And this interest in telling certain histories of this country, certain British American histories, as a way to introduce and build identity actually for newly arrived Americans. That was our founding mission in 1924. It was obviously a more narrow focus on what was American. And in the 20s, that meant British America. So that's what's so exciting to think about over these different decades, how we've continued to broaden the collection, bringing fine arts, quote, painting, sculpture, drawings into the realm of the decorative arts as well. And here we are, in fact, our first artifact, Martin Thompson's second bank of the US down on Wall Street.
how meaningful, of course, as well, not only as a neoclassicist facade, as a preservationist idea, but also it's a bank.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
So you are in New York, you are in the center of also capitalism, right? And this is the entry towards the American wing, the entry towards the idea of American culture.
Robert DeForest, who was the president of the Met when he saved this facade, had this vision that this would be the entrance to what is still the core of the American wing. We still honor that history because, it defines us still. But of course, what's inside those galleries now is far more diverse, far more complicated, really looking at those challenging histories in fresh ways. The American Wing at 100, this major centennial reinstallation project, actually has three components. The first was a reinstallation of our founding collection of 18th century furniture called the Calculated Curve. The second is new introductory welcoming galleries on the first floor. And then the third part is a refresh and a reinterpretation of the second floor painting and sculpture galleries.
Okay, so we're going to end there. Anyone who's interested in watching the rest of the video, it's on YouTube. But hopefully you got to see some of the historical interiors that we're going to look at and understand the importance of those rooms to the museum. And now, with that introduction, we're going to get started looking closer at some of these rooms. Okay, so we're going to do this. We're going to start from the newest room that we'll look at today and go towards the oldest room. And this first room we're going to look at is actually a living room from the Francis W. Little house. The architect is Frank Lloyd Wright. And this is the only Frank Lloyd Wright room that we have in the museum. We do have some of his stained glass windows and furniture and other things, but this is the only complete room we have from Frank Lloyd Wright. As we're looking at these historical interiors, by the way, and historical interiors / period rooms, I should just point out that some of the rooms, just the wood paneling is from the original house, and the furniture might be from that time period. And some of it, the entire room and the furniture, is from the same house and time period. So I'll explain for each room whether it's the architectural motifs and the furniture came from that room, or it's just the architectural motifs and the furniture is from other homes, but from the same time and from the same state. Okay, so this, though, is a complete Frank Lloyd Wright room. And it was designed between 1912 and 1914, again, for the Francis W. Little house. It's the living room of the summer residence of Francis W. Little. It was designed and built between 1912 and 1914 in Louisan, Minnesota, which was a suburb of Minneapolis. And as you're looking at this room, you might recall some of Frank Lloyd Wright's architectural motifs. So this one really epitomizes Wright's concept of organic architecture, in which the building, the setting, the interior, and the furniture are totally related to each other. Every detail of the design fit with every part, including the colors, the materials, the shapes. They all go together. And Frank Lloyd Wright also wanted it to fit with the outside. So both outside and inside fit together. He saw the building and the landscape around it as one space. He wanted everything in the room to blend with the forest and the lakefront that were outside of this original house. So the house is composed of a group of low pavilions interspersed with gardens and terraces, which radiate from a central symbolic hearth. Okay, and I think it's going to be very interesting how many fireplaces we're going to see today, which is related to the weather that everyone's experiencing right now. And here you can see the fireplace on the other side of the room. So this room also is an example of one of Frank Lloyd Wright's most important contributions to modern architecture, and that's the idea of spatial continuity. As you're looking at the room, you'll notice that there are low overhanging roofs. There are a lot of geometric window grills. As you're looking at the windows, and the windows have stylized plant motifs, which again link the interior with the exterior, both visually and spatially. Again, this was a house that was in a wooden site overlooking Lake Minnetonka. So again, the windows could look outside. From outside, you could look in. From inside, you could look out. And that was Frank Lloyd Wright's, combining the inside and the outside. The living room itself is not merely a single enclosed volume, but it's a series of horizontal levels surrounded by glass, which again allows the interplay of natural light and the rich earthy tones that Wright employed throughout the room. So again, the setting, the earthy tones, the feeling of nature and the different woods that you see in the room, all combining inside and outside. The room achieves tonal harmony through the combination of the plaster walls, the natural oak trim and flooring, the use of the exterior reddish brown bricks for the fireplace that you can see, again, bringing kind of the outside in with these outside looking bricks on the inside, and also the leaded windows with a copper finish. And of course, Frank Lloyd Wright also did a lot of stained glass windows with geometric shapes. The idea was to bring outside light into the room. We also see the bold forms of the oak furniture. They were likewise conceived as an integral part of the composition. And of course, the oak furniture bringing the outside in as well. Notice the center of the room is empty. So it's a very large open space in the middle, and the furniture groupings enliven the peripheral space. So the furniture is all in the peripheral space. Many of the accessories are similar to those in the original room, and others recall objects that appear in period photographs. So not all of this furniture was in this original room, but it's all the style of the furniture that would have been in this room. It is a very long and spacious room. When Wright designed furniture, he thought about how it was used and how he might be able to make it better. So if you notice this sofa that's facing the fireplace, and let's see, we can see the back of it over here. So here's the back of that sofa that's facing the fireplace. And now we're going to look at the front of it. So notice the sofa. It has big, comfortable seats. It has very wide arms that could also be used as tables. So again, he wanted to make very useful furniture and think about how best it could be used. So I'm going to show you this sofa a little bit on its own so you can actually see how it would be used. So here's the sofa. Again, notice how the wide arms, you could put books there, you could put, other things there. So very, very useful, very accessible. And also notice how Frank Lloyd Wright designed the windows on either side of the room. Again, very geometric, letting light in. So the room, the furniture, the whole feel to it, all goes along with Frank Lloyd Wright's conception as an architect. Okay, so that's our Frank Lloyd Wright room. Now we're going to go back in time about 100 years to our next room. And as you're looking at these rooms, please, notice the differences, notice the furniture, the time period. All of this is very important to these rooms, the history behind the rooms, the history of the time period. And we'll talk about a lot of those things as well. Okay, so here we're looking at a parlor from the William C. Williams house. This was made in Richmond, Virginia. And the room is from around 1810 to 1811. And the main materials in this room are mahogany and marble. So this parlor was acquired from a house built for the Richmond lawyer. His name was William Clayton Williams. He lived from 1768 to 1817. And the room's most notable features are its rich mahogany woodwork and its blue and gray King of Prussia marble baseboards. Now, as you're looking at this room, please notice the wallpaper. That's a very important part of this room, and we'll look at it closer up. The room's wallpaper features scenes of Paris. It is a reproduction of the type that was sold in the United States in the 1810s. The furniture that we're looking at is Duncan Phyfe furniture, and Duncan Phyfe was one of 19th century America's leading cabinet makers. So this is his furniture. Now, in this room, the furniture is not original to the room, but again, it is similar to the furniture that would have been in the room, and it's from the same time period. And it also, the furniture, of course, enhances the sophisticated Anglo-French aesthetic of this room. Also notice the carpet. The carpet is a French woven wool carpet from around 1800. So the room, the furnishings, everything is from around 1800. The room is known in the museum as the Richmond Room. So I've always been fascinated by this room because of the wallpaper, which we're going to look at close up. But also I want to point out a couple of other details when we're in this view. First of all, again, notice the fireplace. You'll see fireplaces, I think, in all the rooms we're going to look at. And think about the time of these rooms. And we'll talk about this more with some of our older rooms. But, today, of course, we're blessed with modern heat. But in those times, if it was cold, like it is now, and you're in Richmond, Virginia, you certainly need a good fireplace going. So all these rooms that we'll be looking at have nice fireplaces. The other thing that's very interesting that you'll notice in some of these rooms is the mirror. Now it's way, way high up. This is not a mirror that someone would be able to look at themselves in, but a lot of these rooms had mirrors across from a chandelier, which would have had, candles in it. And that was a way to reflect more of the light, because of course they were lighting the room through candles, either on chandeliers or just simple candles. So a mirror was a way to reflect that light. So I think that's also a very interesting thing to look at. So let's look a little bit closer at this amazing wallpaper. And again, it's a copy of a very popular French pattern. It was called the Monument of Paris. So it was wallpaper with all the monuments of Paris, and it actually depicted all these famous sites of Paris as if they stood right next to each other on the banks of the Seine River. Of course, they weren't all located right next to each other, but it was a way to fit all these monuments of Paris in the wallpaper. And of course, if you think about why would they have this kind of wallpaper in a room in Richmond, Virginia? Well, in the early 1800s, Paris was seen as the capital of the world in terms of fashion, in terms of art. So people wanted to have all things Paris. So this room in Richmond, Virginia has wallpaper showing the famous monuments and famous sites of Paris, which I think is so interesting. Okay, so we're going back to the room here. And also please notice the furniture. As I said, it's Duncan Phyfe furniture from the early 1800s. So here you see how it's displayed in the room, but I want to also have a chance to look at it a little bit closer up. So here we have it close up. And we can see here the sofa and the side chair. They're actually part of a large suite of seating furniture in the museum's collection. It includes, besides these two pieces, it includes a pair of armchairs, 10 side chairs, and 2 footstools. Now, this furniture was originally owned by a man named Thomas Cornell Pearsall, who was a wealthy New York merchant and ship owner. Other chairs from the set, it was a very large set. Met has some of the set, and the Museum of the City of New York has some of the set. Now, how do we know that it was done by Duncan Phyfe? So that's based on the set's traditional history of ownership, which was recorded. And also there was an inscription stamped on the inside of the seat rails on the sofa and several of the chairs. And it's stamped that it was done by Duncan Phyfe. And also the details of this furniture also point to the fact that it was done by Duncan Phyfe. Okay, we're moving on to another room. And as we look at more and more rooms, you'll notice certain things that I've pointed out that you'll notice on your own in these rooms that are repetitive. This is also a room from about 1810 to 1820. And this is the drawing room of the Craig House in Baltimore, Maryland. And again, so now we're in Baltimore, but again, you'll notice some of the things we've been talking about. You notice the fireplace, you notice the mirrors, lots and lots of candles in order to keep the room lit. But again, there are always mirrors located so so the light could be reflected around the room. So the architectural elements of this room, which we call the Baltimore room, they're from the parlor of a brick row house built for a man named Henry Craig between 1810 and 1811. The parlor was the most important room in Henry Craig's dwelling, and it was used to entertain guests. As you can see how the table is set in order to entertain guests. Accordingly, this room would have contained the finest woodwork in the home, which illustrates a delicacy and restraint typical of the neoclassical style of that period. So you can see that we're really looking at a lot of rooms from the East Coast. We started off looking at a room from Baltimore, Maryland. We started off looking at a room from Virginia. Now we're Baltimore, Maryland. And our next room is from a room from the Powell House, Philadelphia. This one's a little bit earlier. This is from 1769, about 1765 to 1766. And this room is from a house that was located at 244 South 3rd Street in Philadelphia. And as I tell you a little bit about the background of the room, look at all the details, notice the furniture, and again, the chandelier and the candles and wallpaper, different things that we've talked about, and that you'll notice the details in this room. So the room was taken from, as I said, it was taken from a house at 244 South 3rd Street in Philadelphia. The house was constructed between 1765 and 66 by a man named Charles Stedman. He was a shipmaster and a merchant. Unfortunately, he had declining fortune, so he had to sell his house almost immediately after its completion. And then it was purchased in 1769 by a man named Samuel Powell. Powell was a wealthy young scion of a notable Philadelphia family. He was educated at the College of Philadelphia, which was later the University of Pennsylvania. He embarked on a 7-year-long grand tour of Europe, and he purchased the house on South 3rd Street 5 days before he got married, and almost immediately he set about renovating it to reflect the taste of he and his new wife. And of course, they wanted to exhibit their wealth, their taste, and their refinement. Now, this room would have been located behind the ballroom on the house's 2nd floor. We're not exactly sure what the function of this room is. It may have been used in conjunction with the ballroom to serve refreshments in, or it might have been one of the house's best side rooms. We're not exactly sure. But Powell employed some of Philadelphia's finest craftsmen in order to remodel this house and this room. As you're looking at it, notice the marble fireplace. Again, fireplaces were very important. Notice the decorative wallpaper in this room. The Powell, the man who bought this house, he would go on to serve as the last mayor of Philadelphia under British rule and the first mayor of Philadelphia after the Revolution. He frequently entertained very important house guests, including George Washington and John Adams, who both visited this home. So it's really interesting to look at this period room and to be in the museum and imagine that it is possible that George Washington or James Adams sat in this room and visited this house. So I do want to show you some details of the furniture. Notice this tea table in the center of the room, and we're going to look at it close up. And also notice this carpet. It's a very interesting carpet that we'll look at both of these items close up together. Okay, the first thing is the tea table. Now, tea was very important. It was a very important pastime in America at this time in the mid 1700s until the 1800s. Also in Europe, tea time was very important. So people put a lot of emphasis and effort into their tea sets and also their tea tables. But look at this tea table, and you'll see something very interesting about it in our next slide. So here we have the tea table and what it was able to do. So this is actually called a tilt top tea table, like a tongue twister. It's called a tilt top tea table. It's from 1765. It was made in Philadelphia, and it's made out of mahogany. And this kind of furniture was really associated with social interactions. Of course, the serving and drinking of tea were indispensable components of fashionable parlors. During the second half of the 18th century, people would come visit for tea. A tea table was very important. This tilt top tea table features a single pillar supported by 3 legs. And as you could see, it could be placed against a wall for storage when the tops were tilted to a vertical position. And remember this type of furniture that could be kind of tilted and pushed against a wall when they needed more space, because we will see this in other rooms as well. So when it was in use, it was like this, and then they would tilt the top, push it against the wall when they weren't having tea or didn't need that. And then the other thing I pointed out was the carpet that we were looking at in the room. This is the same carpet. I'll just show you again what it looks like in the room here. Now, carpets were actually a luxury in colonial America. Until the mid-18th century, owners spread textiles over tables. They wouldn't put them on the floors. They would put them on the table, because the idea of stepping on a textile, having it on your floor, was a very foreign idea until much later on. So at this time, having a carpet was really a luxury. And this carpet that we're looking at is a cross-stitched example. It has floral and geometric motifs. And also, it's a little bit hard to see, but if you get a little close, and I'll point it out, it has words written on it going all the way around this carpet. And it actually has quotations from Edward Young's Night Thoughts. That was a poem that was written between 1742 and 1745. It was a very popular poem. It's all about life, death, and immortality. And you can see the name. It says Dr. Young. His name is over here. And he talks about different things about, as I said, it's all about life, death, and immortality. And this was written on this carpet. So the idea is when you were sitting there, you might look down and read the poem or remember about it. And a very interesting addition to this room. Okay, we're moving on to our next room, and this is a room from the Wentworth House, and this is from Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So you see these are period rooms from all over. And again, as we're looking at these rooms, remember that in 1924, if you came to visit the Met, you would see these same rooms. They're installed pretty much the same way they were in 1924. But again, in 1924, people would visit these rooms, and the Met thought that they were educating immigrants about what it meant to be American. But we still have them in the museum today. And they are some of the favorite rooms that people come visit in the American wing. So this room is, as I said, from the Wentworth House. It's from around 1695 to 1700. And interesting about this room, the museum purchased the entire Wentworth House in 1926. So we're just looking at a room of it, but the museum purchased the entire house in 1926. The house, of course, was built between 1695 and 1700 in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And the original intention of the museum was to dismantle the structure and incorporate the entire house into the interior of the American wing. But that didn't end up happening. And then and now, only two spaces from the house are on display in the museum. We have this room, which is the largest room from the second room. It's called the Wentworth Room. And we also have this staircase from the Wentworth House. So these are two things that are on display, but the museum does own the architectural elements and the furniture from the entire house. So the original owner of the home was named John Wentworth. That's why it's called the Wentworth House. He lived from 1671 to 1730. He was a merchant, a sea captain, and he was also a one-time lieutenant governor of New Hampshire. The house was unusually grand in scale. It was built on a central chimney plan. The structure's main stairway, which we see here, rose from the first floor to the attic, and it was contained within a small entry that abutted against the front of the chimney. The spiral turned balusters are the earliest of this type known in New England. Again, this is a second floor room. It is also distinguished as one of the largest domestic interiors surviving from the early colonial period. So it's quite amazing. This room from 1695 still survives, and it's furnished with a combination of English and American-made furniture in the William and Mary or the early Baroque style. Now, again, some things we've talked about before that hopefully you'll notice as you're looking at this room. Of course, notice the fireplace. Notice where the carpet is. It's not on the floor, but it's on the table, where carpets or rugs usually were in early times. Also notice very sparse in terms of the objects that are in the home. And notice this table against the wall, right, where it could be pulled out and the whole top could be open. But when it wasn't in use, it was pushed against and part of it was folded down. Okay, we are now moving on to the oldest room in the house, which I referred to earlier. It also happens to be one of my favorite spaces in the museum. It's on the third floor of the museum. It's kind of hidden away. A lot of people don't know about it. And but because I worked at the museum and spent a lot of time in this area, I spent a lot of time taking my children when they were younger to this room because I thought it was such an educational way for them to understand how people lived in early colonial times. So this is a room from 1680. It's called the Hart House, and it's from Ipswich, Massachusetts. From 1680. And we'll look at a couple of views of this room. It's a very small room. Again, as you're looking at it and thinking about the weather that you're having now and cozy interiors, imagine what Ipswich, Massachusetts was like in 1680 without heat. And then you'll notice some of the details in the room and how they kind of dealt with that in the winter. The room is made out of wood, oak, and pine, and it's a room in the museum that you can go into. You can sit in the middle of the room and really spend time in it. And again, I think sitting in this room, you learn a lot about colonial life, about colonial architecture, and how people lived during those times. So this is the earliest period room that we have in the Met. Again, it's from 1680. Its architectural elements are typical of 17th century New England interiors. So the architectural elements, the wood beams and the ceilings and all those are original to the room. The furnishings are not, except for the bed, the furnishings are not all the originals, but they're a fine example of late 17th century Massachusetts made furniture. So the furniture is from the same time period. It is from that area of Massachusetts, but not necessarily from this room. And you see in this room that craft practices were brought English craftsmen, English joiners and turners would come to the colonies and bring their crafts with them. So this room is from the home of Samuel and Sarah Hart. They lived in Ipswich, Massachusetts. Now, this is not a picture, of course, of the home from 1680. This is a picture from 1890. But just to give you an idea of where the room came from, so this is what the house looked like in 1890. The room that we just looked at that's on display at the Met came from the first story to the left of the front door. Of course, from 1680 to 1890, the house was quite enlarged because the Hart room there were only 2 rooms to the house when they lived there in 1680. So, so the home was owned by Samuel and Sarah Hart. He was a first-generation New Englander. He was like his father. He was a tanner by trade, and the house was completed within 2 years of their marriage in 1678. And again, when it was their home in 1678, it was only 2 rooms. So we're going to look at the one room, and then there was another small room that we'll talk about as well. So as you're looking at the room, you'll notice that it's a study in contrast. Compare the massive oak timbers. There are very large oak timbers on the ceiling. Compare those with the tiny, thinly leaded lights or the panes of glass, the diamond-shaped glass that we see in these casement windows. We also have the dark exposed structural beams. These are the original beams, the joist, and the beams across the ceiling, which is hard to see in this picture, but all those are the original beams, and they provide a rhythmic counterpoint to the whitewashed plaster walls. As you're looking at the room, you're looking at the most valuable piece of furniture or the most valuable thing that the Hart family owned, and that was the parents' bed. This is their bed, and it was the most valuable thing that they had. Now, this was a one-room house. We're seeing one side of it, and then we'll see the other side of it. So because of that, you'll notice the hangings on the bed, and the hangings on the bed provided warmth, of course, in the winter, and also privacy, because the baby was sleeping right here, and some of the other children might have been sleeping on the floor as well. Now, notice how would they keep warm in Ipswich, Massachusetts in the winter? Besides a fireplace, which we'll look at, which is on the other side of the room, notice the very small panes of glass. The windows were kind of small. Glass was also very expensive back then. So, of course, that's also why the windows were so small. The ceilings are also it's a little hard to tell from here, but the ceilings are very low. When tall people come into this room, they kind of have to bend a little. So that was a way to keep the heat from the fireplace in the room as well. So many different ways to keep warm in those very cold winters. Now, the furniture in the room that we will look at reflects the craft practices of English immigrant artisans who settled coastal Massachusetts between the 1660s and the 1690s. The raw materials for the furniture that you see in this room are plentiful throughout New England. Of course, we are pointing at the bed, the bed hangings, which provide both warmth and privacy. As I said, they were typically made of heavy woolen cloth that matched upholstered furniture in the room as well. Now, hopefully you can see here in the corner a piece of furniture that we are going to look at a little closer up in a few minutes. But this is another example of a piece of furniture that had multiple uses. So it was a chair. It was a table chair. So it could be used as a chair, or you can see the top would be folded over and used as a table. And of course, if you had a one-room home, you would want to be able to push the table against the wall when you were doing other things in the middle of the room. So that's a very interesting piece of furniture that we'll look at a little bit closer here. You saw that in the corner. Now you see what it looks like as both a table and a chair. So it's a convertible furniture form. It's a chair table. It has a hinged top that can pivot up to become the back of the seat, or it can pivot down to become the top of a table. And these distinctive objects were well suited to rooms where many activities took place. As you saw in that room, you would sleep in that room, you would eat in the room, the kids would do work in the room, you would cook in that room, as I'll show you in the fireplace. Many activities took place, so you had to have multiple uses for the furniture. And this type of furniture was present in homes in the coastal towns of Plymouth County, Massachusetts. With its top tilted, as it's seen in the room over here, it's a very imposing looking chair. Okay, so this is one side of the room, and I wanted to show you the other side of the room. Here's the other side of the room. And again, this is a one-room house where everything took place in this room: sleeping, eating, cooking, any kind of activities. So here you see another way that they kept the room warm besides the low ceilings and the bed hangings and the small glass in the windows. Here we have a very large fireplace, and I love looking at this fireplace. Again, this is such a great room for thinking about how people lived in colonial times. Notice the frying pan with a very long handle so that you could stand far away from the fireplace and cook the food you needed to cook. Also notice the pot would be hanging above the fireplace. So if you made a soup or some kind of stew, you could hang it from this above the wood and let it cook there. There's also an oven over here, right? So if they heated something up, they wanted to keep it heat, they would put it in this in the brick oven over here that they have in the fireplace. It's a little hard to see here, but this is an old-fashioned toaster where they just put 2 pieces of bread over here, also a longer handle so they could hang it over the fire or hold it over the fire. And this object, very interesting, another way to keep room warm. And again, in this cold weather we're having, it's important to understand how people in colonial times would keep warm. So this over here is a bed warmer. Okay, so notice the long handle. They would put this gold, with the metal end over the fire. They would heat it up, and then they would put it underneath the parents' bed, and that's how they kept it warm. So, today you might have electric blankets or whatever you're using to keep yourself warm in bed. They would have this old-fashioned bed warmer over here. Also notice the upholstery of the bed also matches the upholstery here. So again, it's a one-room home. There was, as I said, well, it was 2 rooms, but it was one main room. There's a door right over here. This door would lead to a very small attic where some of the other children would sleep. So they all didn't have to sleep in this one room. So again, I think looking at these rooms is really interesting to understand colonial times, colonial furniture, and the families that lived in these dwellings. Okay, we're going to go on to our next room, which is also a very fascinating room, although we're going into the future a little bit. Our last room, the heart room, was from 1680. Now we're jumping to 1830. Take a look around this room, compare it with some of the other rooms we've been looking at, and notice some of the different elements in this room. It's very interesting. These are architectural elements from a shaker room. So they're architectural elements from it was called a retiring room. And it was from a home called the North Family Dwelling. It was in New Lebanon, New York, and it's from 1830 to 1840. So as you're looking at this room, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Shakers, the group that this room came from their dwelling place. And then we'll talk about the use of the room and the furniture and their philosophy, which extended to their furniture and their dwellings as well. So the Shakers were a socially progressive Protestant sect. They believed in racial and sexual equality. They believed in pacifism, and they believed in common property, and they also believed in celibacy. By the mid-19th century, the Shakers had established 18 communes from Maine to Kentucky, and they had about 6,000 members by the mid-19th century. The room that we're looking at here has been installed with architectural elements from the North Family Dwelling that was located in Mount Lebanon in upstate New York. And we also have in this room Shaker-made furniture and textiles. Now, the North Family Dwelling that I've been talking about, it was a 5-story building. It was designated for one of Mount Lebanon's 8 work and faith units, or they would call them families, but they were work and faith units. And the building, this 5-story building, which would contain kitchens, dining rooms, a large chapel, and meeting rooms, and retiring rooms. This is an example of a retiring room. A retiring room served as both a bedroom, and it also was a place to retire and spend time as prescribed by the Shakers' laws. And the room would be used to, quote, sit in silence for the space of a half an hour and labor for a sense of the gospel before attending meetings. So people would sleep in this room, but they'd also use it to prepare themselves for before they had meetings. Originally, the room would have multiple beds. Right now, there's just one bed in it, but originally it would have multiple beds for all the women who shared it. And we think probably about 4 women or 4 sisters would share this room. Now, as you're looking at this room, and we're going to see a few views of it, this is also one of my favorite spaces in the museum. Notice the simplicity and order that prevail in the room. Also notice its Spartan nature. And the reason I like to show this room after I show all those kind of fancy rooms from the Richmond House and the Baltimore House is to really see the difference. Again, this room is from around 1830 or 1840. And those earlier rooms from the Richmond room with the Paris wallpaper, those are from the 1810s. So we're talking about the same time period. Notice the difference between this room and those rooms, right? Now, this room really shows us the three of the most typical characteristics of Shaker design, and those are utility, simplicity, and beauty. Okay, so notice the utility and the simplicity of this room. Everything, every object in the room has a practical purpose. And we'll talk about the practical purpose. But as you're looking, please get an idea in your minds about these characteristics of the room: utility, simplicity, and beauty. Okay, we're going to look at another view of the room. So notice in the middle of the room, talking about heating a room, we have a cast iron stove. Now notice how it's pretty much in the center of the room to distribute heat evenly. Okay, and again, utility and simplicity, it's okay that you can see, the pipes, the idea of utility and simplicity, but the idea of distributing heat evenly. Also on the right side, you can see there's a white pine washstand and a towel rack. Again, you wake up in the morning, you can wash right there. Mirror is very high up. It wasn't meant to beautify yourself, but just to, check that everything is done properly. Notice the built-in furniture. The Shakers were some of the earliest people to have built-in furniture. And again, the idea of utility and simplicity that we see. And again, this room would have been shared by 4 sisters of the Mount Lebanon community. They slept here. They might have done some sewing. And the rocking chair that you see over here, rocking chair is near the stove. Notice the step stool. It's a 2-step footrest near the rocker. Very, very useful. And the reason is that a sister could put one foot above the other to elevate the stitchery in her lap to a height that's convenient for working. So everything has use, everything has simplicity, and of course, also very Spartan in nature. Okay, so I want to show you this rocking chair a little bit closer up. Here we'll just look at another view of the room. Again, we can see the built-in furniture, a chair and a desk, very simple. The bed in the corner. We'll talk about that more. And notice there are candles in the room. Again, if you think about our early rooms with the fancy chandeliers and lots of candles, here we have very simple candles, just in a candle holder, nothing extra. Okay, so here's a close-up of the rocking chair and the bed that we saw in the corner. Here we have the bed. So this rocking chair is from the 1820 to 1850. And previously, rocking chairs were really reserved for older people, for infirm people, but they became ubiquitous in America after the Revolution. And the Shakers produced a lot of these rocking chairs. They would make these slap-back rocking chairs for their own use, but they would also sell them to their outside world. That's how they made money. And in this example, you can see the oval finials, you can see the round hand grips, you can see the shaped blades. It suggests that this one was made specifically for the New Lebanon, New York community. Now, Shakers believed that work was a form of worship when it was done for the benefit of the community. So, they were very involved in work. And again, everything had a reason and utility. As I said, I pointed out the bed in the back corner over here. Notice the wheels on the bed. It has non-pivoting wooden wheels, and we can see them clearer over here. And again, the reason for that was that the bed could be pulled straight out from the wall for efficient cleaning and for the changing of the bed covers. So everything has a reason, a purpose, utility. The Shaker law, by the way, stated that bed covers had to be modest color and no patterns. And that's what you see over here. Now, something else you might have noticed, very interesting going around this room, and I don't think you can see the detail of it, but if you notice the wood trimming going all the way around this room, and I'm going to show you what that wood trimming is for. As I said, everything has utility and serves a practical purpose. So here you can see it's not just wood trimming, but it actually has pegs going all the way around the room. This pegboard. And the reason is that the Shakers would line almost every room with pegboards on which all kinds of spare items were hung when they're not in use. So if you weren't using a chair, it was hung on the pegboard. If you were cleaning the room, you would hang, different things on that pegboard. Again, it was a symbol of order and convenience. And in many Shaker interiors, you have this pegboard that would run around the room to suspend objects from the floor, again, for more efficient storage and also for the daily cleaning routines. So all these things that we were looking at in the room today, the built-in cupboards, the pegboards, the austere furnishings, the woodwork. They all, again, reinforce the three most typical characteristics of Shaker design, as I said, which is utility, simplicity, and beauty. And again, this is just an amazing room and helps understand the Shaker, the group, their belief system, and understanding history of different groups in America. Okay, so we're going to go to our last room, which will be very different than our Shaker room. This room is from 1767. And it's an interesting room because the woodwork comes from one family in one house and the furniture comes from another. And we'll talk about that. So the woodwork is from a room from the Colden House in Coldenham, New York. But the furniture, the paintings, and the ceramics in this room all belong to the Verplanck family, Samuel and Judith Verplanck. Samuel Verplanck was a member of an influential New York City family. And this is the furniture from their house. And I will explain why we don't have the remains of their house as well and why it has to be put in the architectural elements from another house. So the Verplancks lived in an elegant Georgian-style brick house, which was located at 3 Wall Street. We actually have an old picture of the Verplanck house from this print. This is a print of Wall Street. It's showing our Verplanck house right over here from the mid-1700s. So that's where all the furniture was from this home. But this residence was actually demolished in 1822, and that's why we don't have the woodwork from the room. We just have the furnishings from the room. Now, this home that you see over here was more ornate than this room that we're looking here. It was a much more ornate home. So we're mixing this room. So here we have the room, the fireplace, again, fireplace always important. The fireplace wall and the woodwork all comes from a different house. And then the furnishings come from the Verplancks house. So the fireplace and the woodwork come from a house that was built in 1767 in the Hudson River Valley by the Coldens, and they were descendants of another story New York family. But since no New York City parlors from the area remains intact at the time that the Verplanck descendants donated their heirloom to the Met in the 1930s and 40s, so we took the furniture and the artwork from the Verplanck house and we put it into the Colden parlor in the museum. So we have a mixture really of 2 houses from the same time period. But we have, as I said, the woodwork from the Colden house, and we have the furniture, paintings, and ceramics from the Verplanck house. So it's pretty amazing. The woodwork in this room came from a large stone house in Coldenham, New York, from 1767. And then all the furniture and paintings and ceramics came from this house over here from 3 Wall Street, New York. Okay, so what's so interesting about this period room is it's definitely the only period room in the Met and maybe anywhere in any museum where you can see all of one family's furniture shown in the way it would have been used in the 18th century when it was new. So all this furniture that you see here, the way it's displayed with the paintings and the objects is the way it would have been displayed in the Verplanck house in the late 18th century. We're going to look at some of the furniture close up, but you can see there's matching tables and chairs. I don't know if you've noticed the upholstery of the furniture in the different, here we have yellow upholstery. In another room, we had green upholstery, we had red upholstery, so lots of different colors. I want to point out also this card table, which is very interesting and unique. We'll talk about this. All of this was made by one craftsman in the same style. It's very English, mid-18th century Georgian or Chippendale style furniture, but it was done by a New York City craftsman. You'll also see in this room 2 family portraits over here, and these portraits were done by America's greatest 18th century portraitist, and that was John Singleton Copley. And we'll look at the portraits in a few minutes. And then there are 2 other paintings. So these are all the paintings, the furniture, all that you see here, the ceramics are all from the original from the Verplancks house. Let's look a little bit closer at this furniture. Let's take a look at this card table, and then I'm going to show it to you close up because it's quite a unique, interesting piece of furniture. Here's a better view of the card table over here. And then we'll look at it on its own. Here we go. So it's from around 1765. It's made out of mahogany. And it has mahogany, it has birch, it has tulip poplar. It's got a lot of different woods, and it has these projected rounded corners. This piece of furniture descended in the Verplanck family, along with 4 side chairs, a tea table, and a couch. And as is typical of New York made tables, this example has notice the pronounced edging, which is amazing if you look at that. It continues all the way along the table. Also notice the legs or the feet, which are called claw and ball feet, and they even have small back talons, which is amazing. We also have the side chair over here, also from 1760 to 1790, also from the Verplanck family. And here you can also see the easy chair. So this is the original furniture from the family from the 1760s. And again, even though their house was demolished in 1822, all of the furniture and all of the paintings were donated to the museum. And here you can see the portraits. Again, these are portraits that were done by foremost artists at that time, John Singleton Copley, done of Samuel Verplanck, and this is actually his brother. So we have Samuel Verplanck and his brother, and then we also have a painting of Samuel Verplanck's son. This painting is not in the room, but it's elsewhere in the museum, and this is Daniel Cormillion Verplanck. This was also done by John Singleton Copley. And this painting was done in 1771. I think it's so interesting just to spend a minute looking at a portrait of a young boy. He was, I don't know if anyone can guess or has any idea how old he was, but this painting was painted when he was 9 years old. And notice that notice the way he's dressed. Again, I think these paintings are so interesting in terms of period pieces. Noticing the clothing people are wearing. Look at the pet that he has in that time. He had a pet squirrel that he has in his portrait. And look at it, so detailed that you can see the feet and the claws of the pet squirrel, which are kind of grabbing onto his stocked-in foot. Look at the shoes and the clothing that he's wearing. And he's actually sitting not in front of the Verplanck house that we saw on 3 Wall Street. He's sitting in front of their house that they had in the country that we're looking at over here. And then here's the room again with the 2 portraits and then 2 other small paintings. So again, looking at the furniture and the fireplace, and really seeing this historical interior is quite amazing. So what I want to do, we have a couple minutes left, but I want to take a minute just to tie all of the period rooms that we're looking at back to the American wing. So all these period rooms are in the American wing, but I don't know if you remember that we saw at the beginning. Here we go. So when you're in the American wing courtyard, remember I talked a little bit about this bank facade, and they also talked about in the video that it was a bank facade on Wall Street, and then when it was taken apart in 1915 and they were going to demolish it, it was boxed up, and the Met purchased it, and then they put it up in 1924 to open up the American wing. But I want to connect this facade to the Verplanck house that we were just talking about. Remember, I said the original house was on 3 Wall Street right over here. So in 1822, the Branch Bank of New York, this is the facade of Branch Bank of New York. So in 1822, the Branch Bank of New York purchased the Verplanck home, and they demolished the house, but they purchased the home and the surrounding lots. They demolished the house, and they erected the Branch Bank of New York right over here on the site of the Verplanck house. So not only does the Met have the facade of the bank, but they also have the furniture from the house, which was demolished in order to build the bank. So it all comes kind of full circle back here to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So here we have the facade of the Second Branch Bank of New York. Again, it was built in 1822 on the site that we just saw. The architect was Martin Euclid Thompson, who was an American architect, and he was the leading exponent of Greek Revival style architecture in New York during the first half of the 19th century. So he built this 2-story, 7-bay facade of the Branch Bank of the United States. It was quite an amazing building with Ionic capitals Some cornice moldings have Greek inspiration. And the building was located on the north side of Wall Street between, anyone who's familiar with Wall Street, it was between Nassau and William Streets. And in the 1850s, it was converted into the United States SA office. It was demolished in 1915, as I said, but the facade was saved. It was reconstructed, and it's here in the front of the museum's American wing, and it was here in 1924 when they unveiled the American wing. So it's really an amazing architectural feat, and it's, to me, quite amazing that we have both the bank facade and the furniture from the house that used to stand on the same piece of property. Okay, so before we open up for questions, I do want to do a little bit of a virtual tour. Some of the period rooms we can actually see in the museum, not all of them, but some of them. Of course, as I always say with a virtual tour, it was done in more than 10 years ago. So it's not as crisp and clear, and that's why I show you the rooms and I show you the furniture in a PowerPoint. But I think just to get a feel of what they look like in the museum, we'll do a virtual tour together so we can see some of these rooms. Okay, so here we are. It looks the exact same, except now we can move around. Here we are in the American Wing courtyard, of course, with our bank branch facade over here. For anyone who was with me last week, this is also or last month, I should say, this is also the room with all the stained glass windows that we looked at last time. We'll see the stained glass windows that are across from the branch facade, and some of the stained glass windows that are up here. Okay, so we'll get a little bit closer. Now, the Frank Lloyd Wright room that we were looking at, you enter through these doors to go into it. The Frank Lloyd Wright room is not on the virtual tour, so I can't take you there, but it's right over here. There's actually, for anyone who's been to the museum, there's a cafe over here, and then behind it, here's the Frank Lloyd Wright room we were looking at. We are going to go down this hall over here. And as we're going, some of you will recognize the stained glass window we looked at last time. We're going to pass through there. And we're going to go just behind the bank facade into the area with a lot of the historical interiors. So the historical interiors are all located, or most of them are located to the sides over here. Some of them we've seen, some of them we didn't see today. But so this one we didn't look at today, but it's a bedroom over here. We did look at this one. This is from the Richmond. This is the Richmond room with the wallpaper. And again, I know it might look a little bit blurry or a little bit hard to see, and that's not your computer. It's the virtual tour because it's older technology, and it actually won't allow me to go any farther into the room. Otherwise, it bounces us out. So, but hopefully you can at least see the wallpaper on the wall and a little bit some of the furniture that we looked at together. Okay, we're going to go back out to the other side. And we saw this room also over here with the set table. And we talked about there's the mirror up here shining the light from the chandelier. So here's what the room looks like in its setting. We did not see this room, but it's another room in the museum. So you'll notice, as I said, there are 20 period rooms in the museum. And they're quite amazing. Okay, now we do have the shaker room. So I'm going to bring you that. The other amazing thing about the virtual tour is it lets you go right through walls and through doors. Okay, so the shaker room is back here. Here we go. So here we are in the shaker room. So hopefully you can a little bit see, because I can only show you pictures of each side, but now hopefully you can see it kind of the whole room together. And you'll notice the things we talked about, the wood burning stove right in the middle, and the bed in the corner with the wheels. And here we have the chair hanging just so people can see the pegs. And those pegs go all the way around this room. Of course, the museum installed, modern lighting into the room so we could see it. But that, of course, wouldn't have been. But you see the pegs go all the way around the room. And here we're back to the view so you can really see it. So again, it's hard to see the furniture in detail, but this gives you an idea of what the rooms look like. And again, in this area of the museum, we have all 20 of these period rooms, some on the first floor, some on the second floor. And then not only the period rooms, but we have just rooms full of different furniture from colonial times, to the mid 1900s in this area. This is actually a really neat side room, which is not, we didn't see today, it's not a period room, but I will bring you in just because it's an incredible room. It's called the Vanderlyn Panorama, and it's a painting. The reason it's here is because it's done by an American artist, but it's a full room panoramic painting of Versailles, and it was done by an American artist. It's quite an amazing work of art, and it's right across from the Shaker Room. So even though it's Versailles, it was done by an American artist, and that's why it's here. And here you can see the size of the room. It's quite an amazing room in the American Wing. It's not always open because it has to be staffed by a lot of guards, but it's a very special space, and it's right across from the Shaker Room. So I think those are all the period rooms that the virtual tour will allow us to be in, but hopefully you get a little bit of an idea of the space here. Up these stairs is where we were looking at the other period rooms. Over here, I think we were already in this room before. So again, just the virtual tour gives you an idea of what the rooms look like. This is the Richmond room we were looking at from a different view. It doesn't let us go into the room. But hopefully just being in the room and getting an idea of how the rooms are set up in the museum, and really the importance of these historical interiors to the American Wing. And this, as I said, if you came to the Met in 1924, you would walk through these same galleries. They're set up the same way they were in 1924, the same historical interiors. And it's really one of the highlights of visiting the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Okay, so I'm going to end here because I want to make sure to leave time for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Elana. That was perfect for a winter's day like we have today. And I'm going to open up for questions, including the Mirowitz Center. If anybody there, give your questions to Daniel and he'll send them to this way. But does anybody have their hands up? Otherwise, okay. I see Rita. Do you want to go first, Rita?
Sure. Elena, that was wonderful. It was just amazing to see all that. It makes me want to go in person. But so two questions. One, that last sort of tour that you did, there was a room with like a checkerboard floor. And I don't know if that was carpet or actually painting on the floor.
That checkerboard floor is actually tiled.
Oh, okay.
The tile floor.
That's interesting. Okay. And the other question is, how does the Met back in the day know that a house is going to be demolished or for sale? And how do they get the furniture and stuff like that?
So they got furniture in different ways. Like some of the furniture, I mean, they got in different ways. Some of that furniture was donated to the museum from descendants. Sure. Like a lot of the furniture, went down was kept in the family, and then a lot of it was donated by different family members. Like the Verplanck family, they descendants donated that furniture to the museum. Because even though the house was demolished, all the furniture was kept. In terms of the bank facade, I think that would have been, in newspapers or whatever, that they were taking down the bank facade. And I know there was a lot of negotiations. I think the president of the Met heard about it, and they really wanted the Met to be able to own it. So they talked to them about, they had negotiations about that, and then they took it apart and stored it and then brought it to the museum. Because remember, it was the bank was demolished in 1915, and the American Wing wasn't really set up till 1924. So they had to pack it up, and then they stored it. But they would have had, they knew about that when that was happening. Also, in terms of most of the furniture that we have, though, was donated to the Met, often by family members.
And how do they do the flooring? Because I'm assuming they can't take the flooring from a house.
Right. So most of the flooring is not
Yeah.
from the original home. But as you saw in some of the examples, like the carpeting would have been from the original home for those that had. Otherwise, what they did with flooring was there are a couple rooms in the museum where the flooring is the original, but otherwise they make it look as it, the same type of wood and make it look as to match the paneling and other things in the room.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I see the Steinbergs have a hand up.
Yeah, we were wondering, back in the 18th and 19th century, where did they get the wood for all these fireplaces like in the middle of Manhattan? Where did they get the wood
Hmm.
to burn?
Oh,
Okay, so it's interesting. A lot of the rooms that we saw were from other places, right? A lot of like the first rooms that we were looking at and the fireplaces we were talking about, the first one we looked at, one was from Richmond, Virginia. We had from Baltimore, Maryland. We had from Philadelphia. We had from lots of different places. But also the last house that we looked at from 3 Wall Street. So that family also owned a house in Fishkill, like upstate. So they owned houses. They owned a house in another place. So perhaps they brought wood down from somewhere. They definitely brought wood in from somewhere else, and they might have brought it in from their estate. I don't know if you remember the picture of their son, Daniel Verplank. And if you notice in the picture, there were lots of trees and lots of things in the background behind him. So for that house on Wall Street, they would have had to bring it in from somewhere else. But also these were quite well-to-do families, so they found a way to bring wood in.
Well, the Shaker family wasn't all that wealthy in there. I can't remember where
Right.
that was, but
they were from New Lebanon, New York. So they were from like upstate New York. Yeah. So they had access to wood. And they also used wood to make all that furniture. So they had access to a lot of wood. Yeah.
So Riva asked about your program next month. The date is Tuesday, February 24th. Alana, do you want to talk a minute about next month's program?
Sure. Next month's program is going to be in honor of Black History Month, and we're going to look at 3 well-known African-American artists, Ramar Bearden, Jacob Lawrence, and Faith Ringgold. And we're going to talk about how their works of art told stories, and also the connection between their works of art and their connection to Harlem and to the Harlem Renaissance.
This is the first time we've done a plug for the next program. So I thought that was kind of a appropriate thing to do here.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anybody else have a question? My question was sort of the same thing. So the wallpapers, are they just recreated versions of what they thought were there? I mean, it's not like they went in there and took pictures of them before the place was demolished. How do they remember?
Right. So the wallpaper actually, so it wasn't original to the room, but the wallpaper is they actually did have and I can show you on the virtual tour, but it's really hard to see outside of the room. They have drawings of they did drawings of the original wallpaper.
Okay.
From that time, because the family wanted the wallpaper was also done according to what the family was interested in. They wanted to have all the monuments of France, like in the wallpaper. So there were all these drawings that were done of it. And then the wallpaper was redone based on those drawings. And they have a room outside of the period room with those, with the drawings, which is pretty interesting. Yeah.
Very interesting and inspiring. It was a wonderful idea. This was Alana's idea for a cold winter's day, and I think it was perfect.
Oh, good. I think it's also, interesting to think about, maybe how privileged we are that we have, indoor heating and indoor plumbing, and seeing how people back then were, had to stay warm, and even with their luxurious houses, how cold it could be, and what they had to do to stay warm. So I think it's interesting historically, and also just to appreciate what we have.
I think we're all grateful for heat and electrical power this week.
Definitely.
Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us. Alana, we'll see you next month too, and I hope we see everybody else as well. Thank you again, everyone.
Great, thank you.
Stay
Stay
warm.
warm, everyone.
Thank you.